This video is to focus on the Rguroo applications for sections 4.1 and 4.2. This is really the first time that we're going to be diving in heavy with Rguroo, and that will continue from now until the end of the semester. This also means that the tutor button in Hawk's Learning will be less applicable from this point out in the semester as we transition to solely using our statistical software, Rguroo. The tutor button will always prompt you to do things out by hand and therefore can be a bit confusing when I'm lecturing and showing you guys how to use the software. So know that my intentions from this point out, minus some hand calculations we need to do in 4.3, we will be focused, and my expectations would be that you'll be using Rguroo to do these calculations, which is way more relevant nowadays than doing everything out by hand. We just don't do that anymore. Okay, so to get to Rguroo, it is not linked through Blackboard, although there are explicit directions on how to get here. So in your browser, any browser window, if you type rguroo.com, it'll bring you to the home page. In this home page, you first need to make sure you register, which hopefully you've done at this point in the semester. Directions on how to register are posted in Blackboard. Once you've registered, you should be able to click sign in, which does open up a separate tab. My information is already saved in here because I log in all the time. And once we log in, we can see our landing screen. This screen is different prior to anything I recorded prior to 2022, fall of 2022, or I think that was when the first semester when this changed. Might be later than that. But a lot of my lecture videos are recorded at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. And until I swap those out, the Rguroo images will slightly differ. Mainly this landing page is a dataset editor, and any of the lecture videos that I recorded prior to this year will show a different landing page. So for technology videos, please refer to these isolated, separated tech videos, which are the most up to date. Okay, so we're going to talk about this space, this Rguroo, and how we are going to work with it. We're going to start off basic this week on calculating mean, median, mode, standard deviation for sample, standard deviation for a population, variance for a sample, and variance for population in 4.1 and 4.2, getting us comfortable with this data set editor, different ways that we can maneuver the data and use different buttons in here. And you'll see that we work through a very repetitive process when applying. So I'm going to really focus on one area of Rguroo for chapter 4 so that you can only remember one place to go that will give you all your answers versus there are other summary statistic areas that can give you some answers, but not all. The population ones are only in this numerical summaries area. So it's probably best we just focus on that one area, knowing all of our answers can come from that one. Okay, if we take a look at Hawks, I'm in the 4.1 practice. Starting off with the very basic data set, we can get this data set into Rguroo by copying the data onto our clipboard and pasting it right into the dataset editor. Okay, so if I click on this cell and I click paste, I have pasted my data into this first column. So each column represents a variable. Each row represents the observations of that variable. So for example, if this was labeled, if this variable that I was collecting was your major, then each one of these rows would represent an individual student and their response to that variable. So I could put math in this first cell, science, political science, history, English major, and so on. Each one of those answers, rows, represents a student, and the column itself all represents different majors. So know that every time we are referencing one variable, all of the observations or values need to be in that column. If we are referencing two separate variables, then we would have two separate columns of information. Okay, since this is copied and pasted, by the way, if you do experience it giving you a problem and it's not pasting, it is most likely due to your browser settings. Some browsers do give you a pop-up that says allow this action, and it might happen every time that you sign in to an Rguroo session. And other browsers, it may be somewhere else. If you need assistance with getting the copy paste to work, please make sure to reach out to Rguroo support. I'll show you where that is real quick. Okay, that is going to be right here, contact support. Preferably if there's a way to CC me in your email, or at least mention my name, Professor Wiggins, in your support email, then usually support will CC me in their response. So if you can't follow their directions, then I can make a quick video to help you fix your browser. All right, so before we can actually calculate anything on this, I need to save the data set. There is a little summary button here, but please note that the summary button will give you quick facts like the mean, the median, the mode, and sample statistics. So if you were calculating anything having to do with the sample, then this button is relevant. Okay, but it does still require you to save it first before any calculations can be done. So that's what this pop-up means. It's good to see these pop-ups in these videos so that you know what it's actually telling you to do. This pop-up is just saying, hey, we can't do anything until you save your data set. So I'm going to save this one 4.1 practice. Save as. Then if I hit this summary button, I do get a quick summary. Again, I do caution against using this because you'll learn in 4.3 that the quartiles are not always correct. It's one of the things we're going to have to do out by hand until we can get that fixed. And it's not labeled, so you have to know that everything in this summary window is sample standard deviation and sample variance, which we discuss in 4.2 this week. Sample standard deviation and sample variance are different formulas than population standard deviation and population variance. Recall the differences is what data are we working with? Are we working with all of the data values from a targeted population? For example, Northwestern campus or any college campus, and I'm targeting all the students. So if I had every single student's data, then I would be calculating population standard deviation and population variance. But if I only had some, say I only had you students that are in my class on campus, that is some of the college's students, and therefore I would be perfectly fine with a sample standard deviation and a sample variance. So it all depends on where the data is, how much of the data you have. Do you have all of it or do you have some of it? And that's usually explicitly mentioned in Hawks Learn and whether they want you to calculate a sample standard deviation or variance or a population one. Okay, I'm going to exit out of this screen. It is there for some quick stats, but really caution you against it simply because it is only statistics for sample data, not population. So one-stop shop where we can get everything that we possibly need, whether it's a sample or a population, is to come over here to analytics, drop down the window of analysis, and select numerical summaries. So this area, numerical summaries, we want to get very comfortable with because it can calculate a lot of what we need all in one place. So we're going to have to select our data set first. It will then populate any numerical variables that you have in this window. If at any time your numerical variable is not showing up here, then it just means that your variable is not recognized as a numerical one back in the dataset editor. I'll see if I can make that happen in this video to show you how to fix that. If not, I know I show you in a future video. Okay, so let's move our variable over. We can do that by double clicking. You can do it by click, hold, and dragging, or you can do it by selecting the variable and moving the arrow to the right. So there's three different ways to move the variable over to the selected box. Once it's in the selected box, we are always going to be clicking the univariate menu. Multivariate is not for this class, so no worries on trying to decide which one. Always univariate. And you can see we have quite a large selection of things that can be calculated on this variable. So it's up to you what Hawks is asking for. It depends on what you select. Notice that both sample and population variance are here. Let me click both just so that we can see they are different numbers. And when I hit my eyeball, I get my calculation. So I can see that if I was entering this into Hawks and they asked for variance, well, look, that population and sample variance are two completely different calculated values because the formulas are different, and it does matter which one Hawks is asking for. And you cannot get population variance or population standard deviation anywhere else other than the numerical summary screen, which is why it's a one-stop shop for us. Okay, so for this data set, my mean is 5. So if I was back here, it is just asking me what the mean is. I would enter 5. And yay, celebrate. All right, let me take a look at another problem that's different, a different kind of look to one. Okay, like this one. So the other thing we're covering in 4.1 is a weighted mean. And this is going to come up again when we do probability distributions in chapters 6, a little bit in 6, mainly in 7 and beyond. But a weighted mean means that we have a variable like this average monthly balance, and how much it's being applied is being weighted by what month it's coming after. So depending on how many days there are in the month. So this might not be something that you know off the top of your head, how many days are in September, October, or November. Feel free to use a calendar, but the months other than February alternate 30, 31 all the way through the year. So I know that October, being the month that has Halloween, is a 31-day month, which makes September and November 30-day months. Again, feel free to use the internet and the calendar to help you with these problems. They're always at our fingertips. So I need to get this data into Rguroo, but this time there's no copy data button. And the reason why is because we don't actually need the name September, October, November. We need the days associated with it. So copying and pasting this chart is not particularly helpful. So instead, I want to enter in this data myself. In order to do that, I'm either going to take a picture on my phone of the numbers that we have so that I can easily type this in without having to flip back and forth. Totally up to you though. You may feel more comfortable with flipping back and forth. I like to write things down. Okay, so I've written this down really quickly. You can't see that part. I wrote it down right next to me. But let's head over to Rguroo. And I'm going to open up a new data set editor. Okay, so this one's already a data set. I want a new fresh data set editor. So to do that, I'm going to come here to data. I'm going to go to data import, and I'm going to create a new data set. Be careful. There is create new table, but that is a different type of chart. It's a two-way chart where you have variables both in rows and in columns. And we won't be handling tables in this class. So please make sure you select the data set option. Okay, there is a default number of rows and columns. It's not really that important that you set the rows and columns specifically, and it'll always be way bigger than what we'll ever need. So I would just leave the default as is. Okay, so now I have two variables. I have one variable that represents monthly averages. So I'm going to type those in. My monthly averages was 2,195 and 69 cents. My October average was 2,545 and 93 cents. And my November average was 1,477 and 91 cents. Now over here, instead of typing September, I'm going to type 30 because there are 30 days in September, 31 days in October, and 30 days in November. Now, when I have two variables or more than one, I do like to rename my variables so that when I go into the numerical summary screen, I can remember which one is the actual variable and which one is considered what we call the weights, how to weight the variable. Just like I show you in the 4.1 lecture about a weighted mean referencing your GPA, how the grade, the points, the grade point average points that you get for the grade you get in class is weighted based on how many credits your class is. So an A in a 4-credit class is weighted much heavier in your GPA calculation than an A in a 1-credit class. So that's what the weights are talking about. How do we apply this number? This number is going to be applied 30 times, this number 31 times, and so on. To rename our variables, we're going to hit what I call the hamburger. The hamburger shows up once you are hovering your mouse over var1. The very last option in this drop-down menu when I clicked that hamburger is rename. So I'm going to rename my variable monthly averages. When I click rename, I'm going to get an error. So this is one of the times where the programming language that powers this software is showing up on the front end. So this particular software is called Rguroo because R is the name of the programming language behind it. And the programming language of R does not like spaces and variable names. So when it says, please enter a valid variable name, there is unfortunately some intuition happening there where they're assuming you know R, a little bit about R language to know what's invalid about it. But that's where I come in to kind of fill in those blanks for you guys. So what is invalid is the fact that I have a space. So to fix that, I just need to either put no space or an underscore. Sometimes it doesn't like certain characters like parentheses, but again, just play around with it until it accepts your variable name. Okay, so I say rename, and now it says monthly averages. I'm going to do the same thing for var2 and say days in the month. Again, notice that I did not have any spaces in my variable name. I used underscores instead. Okay, so now I'm going to save this as weighted mean example. Save as. And I'm going to come over here to my analytics, analysis, and again back to numerical summaries to do a weighted mean. Okay, so I'm going to select my data set. Notice now that I have two variables here, both are seen as numerical, but we do not want both into the selected screen. Any variable that's placed into the selected screen will be handled separately. So you will get an average for monthly averages, and you would get a separate, completely calculated separately average for days in a month, which is not what we want. We want these variables to work together with a weighted mean. So you have to know which one is the actual variable and which one is considered the weights. Okay, our averages, the money is our variable, so that needs to come here. But the weights applied to that variable needs to come here in frequency. Okay, so you drop down the menu and frequency. Notice all the numerical variables are also listed here for your choice. When you select something in frequency, notice the first example I didn't even touch this window. When this window is blank, Rguroo knows to calculate a regular average of the variable selected. When this window is another variable selected, Rguroo automatically knows when I ask it for an average that it is using both of these at the same time to make a weighted mean. So clicking my univariate menu, I again only have to select mean. I don't need to necessarily specify weighted. Because the frequency window has something selected, it's automatically assumed to be a weighted mean. And I hit my eyeball to get that weighted average. Now, because this is money, I'm going to assume Hawks probably wants me to round to 2 decimal places. So 2,078 and 37 cents. But I'll double check when I click back. Round to the nearest cent. That makes sense. 2 decimal places. And I can get excited that I have a job well done. Okay, so that's a weighted mean, and that is entering your data manually versus copy and paste. Let me just take a look at maybe one more. Let's try this one. Okay, and this one again, I want to practice copying and pasting. This one might not copy and paste properly, which is why I wanted to pull it up to show you how to correct it if it doesn't. So let's hit our copy data button. Let's head over here to Rguroo. I'm going to come to data, data import, create new data set. Default rows are fine. And I'm going to paste. Oh, so this one pasted vertically, which is what I needed, because remember, each variable weights needs to be in one column, and each variable, like data values, needs to be in one column. Okay, so these are the data values and these are the weights. They're already labeled for us, but unfortunately the labels are in the wrong place. So this will cause you an issue. Anything placed in this white area is considered to be data values, and therefore var1 and var2 are now not likely labeled numerical variables. But first thing we need to do is get rid of these labels out of the actual observation row and up here in the gray area where we can put labels. So in order to delete a row, if you right click on this one, you can delete the entire row. Okay, that's the easiest way to get rid of that. We do want to put the labels back in, so I am going to label this variable weights, and I'm going to label this one data values, I believe it was called. Oh, and again, I have a space, so it's going to give me an issue, so let me put that underscore in. Okay, so now everything's saved. I am going to save it, and if it gives me an issue in the other screen, then that's a perfect time to show you guys how to fix it, but let me proceed assuming that everything is good to go. So I'm going to label this weighted mean to save. Okay. I'm just going to go back and make sure I have this right. The weights are the decimals, the data values. We want a weighted mean. Okay, good. All right, so now we come to analytics, analysis, numerical summaries. I also want to point out that on top, these tabs are showing you everything you've done in one logged in session. So if you ever need to go back to a previous data set or a previous calculation, you can do that by clicking these tabs up top. All right, let's select our data set. And what I feared would happen happened, but I wanted to show you what it looks like so that you know how to fix it. Notice none of my variables are showing up in my numerical window, and that's because I originally had categorical data in those columns. Those titles of the columns, weights and data values, were in those white cells originally, and therefore changed the type of variable or the classification of the variable. So we got to go back and fix that. So I'm going to use this tab to get back to my data set. Now, when I click this button here, variable properties, and I come over here to variable properties, I am noticing that my weights has been classified as nominal. Again, it's classified as nominal because originally I had a word in this first row. Even when I deleted it, it didn't reclassify the variable for me. So I do need to click numerical. And I'll have to do the same thing for these data values. So I clicked the data values, weights I already fixed. Data values, I'm going to click and make it numerical. So now both of these variables are saved to numerical. There is no save button. When I click out of here, notice that my data set is now red. Okay, when the title of your data set is red, it means you have to resave it. I spelled weighted wrong, but you have to resave it before it can be accessible anywhere else in Rguroo. So I just have to click Save As. Notice that the title of this tab turned to green, meaning now it's ready to be accessed. And everything that I did has now saved. Okay, so if I come back over here to my numerical summaries tab, and I reselect my data set because it's saved and it's now different. I got to change the data set because that didn't work. Change the data set. Here we go. Now that I have it reselected, okay, if you open up a new numerical summaries, then you wouldn't have the issue I just had where it wasn't recognizing it as a different data set. Now my variables show up because I've reclassified them as numerical. So the data values, remember, double click, click, hold, drag, select, hit the arrow. Either way, just get it over to the selected box. Remember, the weights does not come over here or it will not calculate correctly. I will select weights under this frequency window, which automatically will tell Rguroo that the mean I want is weighted. And I get myself my weighted mean. Okay. Okay, so that is our first taste of Rguroo and copying and pasting, fixing some issues that we may encounter, entering a data set in manually, and using our numerical summary screen to choose from anything in the univariate menu that we want to find out. One more thing before I go. If I'm in this window and then there's a part 2, because we all know there's plenty of step 1, step 2 questions in Hawks. Let's say that the second thing it asked me was for a standard deviation. You can just come right back up here to the basics button and click Univariate again and select anything more that you want. You don't have to start over. So hitting the Basics button reopens the window that'll allow you to change your selections. I hope this was helpful in getting you through and using Rguroo.